There's a loophole in California law that allows citizens in Main Street settings to walk into Starbucks, to order a cup of coffee, to go into a movie theater carrying an unloaded weapon on their openly exposed, with the bullets or the clip right next to it on their belt. This presents a real threat to law enforcement, who get called out often, taking their attention away from other duties. During these tough economic times, we should be maximizing law enforcement resources. It puts those law enforcement officials in harm's way. When an average family out on a Friday night or a Saturday night wants to go to the mall or wants to go to the movies to have a peaceful night out, and they see a collection of folks carrying these weapons, they oftentimes call law enforcement that has to come out and confront these folks who are openly carrying their weapons. That family and that law enforcement official should not be on Main Street and having to confront the unnecessary display of these firearms. Again, this is a loophole in California law. You need a license to carry a weapon. You need a license to have a concealed weapon. But we do not require any training or any licensing or any procedure to openly carry these unloaded handguns. And unloaded is really not the accurate description, because the clips, the magazines, the bullets can be on the very same belt with that weapon. That's too close for comfort. You don't need a handgun to order a cheeseburger. You don't need a handgun to get a cup of coffee. The person on Main Street, California, has the same rights as everyone else in this great body and in this great state to a peaceful exercise of their family activity without seeing the threat of weapons unnecessarily on our streets. Now, the open carry activists would say that had we been in Arizona, we could have taken out the shooter. We would have been there. Well, frankly, the last thing I want to see in a crowded suburban shopping center is a hail of bullets across the crowd. Let the law enforcement personnel who are trained, who are responsible for public safety, do their job. Let folks who are untrained not openly carry their weapon on our street. This bill does nothing to affect the lawful and acceptable uses of weapons in our society. Let the hunter hunt, let the person go purchase their weapon and protect their property. But that person's right does not have a right to infringe on the family activity of Main Street, California. With that, I respectfully ask for an aye vote to close this loophole in California law. Let law enforcement do their job without having to unnecessarily get called out and confront the open carry activists in an unnecessary display of these weapons on Main Street, California. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Donnelly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise in strong opposition to this bill. What the author is trying to do is limit and curb the Second Amendment. It's that simple. He's interested in stripping away a fundamental right. It is not just the right to keep, but it is also the right to bear arms. You know, our founders took this right very seriously. They said a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You know, it's funny that to hear talk about law enforcement being inconvenienced. You know what? Law enforcement has a job to do, and they have an important function in our society. But our founders trusted the people. They trusted the people far more than they trusted anyone else. And they felt that it was necessary for the people to have this right. And I think to take this away at this time is the wrong time. We need to be increasing and repealing these assaults on the Second Amendment, because we want California ultimately to be a free state. In order to live in a free state, you occasionally have to suffer inconvenience. And you know what? I'll accept that. I'll also accept the cost. If it costs us a little more to live as a free man and a free woman in 2011 in America, then I'm okay with that. What I am not okay with is the casual stripping away of rights and liberties that were guaranteed in the Constitution of the United States that each of us swore to uphold and defend. I urge a no vote.
Mr. Fuhrer.
Cost? Let's talk about cost and who stands with the author on this bill. The police chiefs of the state of California stand with the author of this bill in support of his measure, principally because of cost, not in dollars, but potentially in lives. Do any of us in this room want to bring our families to an event where people are carrying exposed weapons, wondering whether the mere presence of those weapons will lead to other people to consider those with those exposed weapons a threat and engage in very dangerous activity? Do any of us want to be in a situation where law enforcement officers, seeing someone with an exposed weapon in what otherwise might be a dangerous setting, potentially make the mistake of firing on that person because that person is thought of as a threat? These are the reasons why our law enforcement leaders support this bill. On my view, this is a public safety measure, and all of us are pledged to support public safety in our districts. This is not about a diminution of anybody's Second Amendment interests or rights. This is about the manner in which you carry a weapon in public. Let's distinguish the two from each other. A well-regulated militia has nothing to do with someone carrying an unloaded weapon in public. Let's set the record straight and think hard as you vote on this bill, the context in which you and your families may find yourselves as this measure, as debated, and last year this measure lost. It emboldens the carrying of these weapons in public. Bad thing. Let's stand with our police chiefs and support this bill.
Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. We did have a very spirited debate about this bill last year, and this is identical to the bill that we voted down last year. There's many different items to this. I don't want to get into a big law discussion, but there is some people out there that believe that if this bill goes through, it does embolden the CCW argument to be passed so that this state will become a shall-issue state. Now, of course, I support that because I wrote that bill, so I'm for that argument. But I don't think that that's the purpose of the author of writing this bill. I think that one of the arguments, and as we see these mics going up from the Los Angeles delegates, Los Angeles has a huge problem with this. Los Angeles, you can do something about this. You can pass a resolution. You can do an LAMC. You can have this in charge. You can do it. Do it. Instead, you come up here and you pick on something that is mostly a rural issue. Probably 99% of the open carry is a rural issue. Has zero to do with Los Angeles, but since Los Angeles continues to bring this up, this seems to be the issue that they want to pass. That's not right. There has never been a police report. There's never been a brandishing. There's never been an issue with the open carry law-abiding citizen. Not one. In fact, when I was in committee, I asked the author, did you bring forward police reports to show that this has become an issue, that this is some rampant problem that we've got? Not a one. I've talked to the police chiefs. Not a one. I've talked to several of the different police agencies up and down the state. Yes, once in a while we get a call. We go over there and we handle it and we leave. No police report, no crime, no criminal activity. Law-abiding citizens doing this. So, what do we do here today? Because we can, we make a law against that law-abiding citizen to get rid of it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going down that slippery slope that we always talk about. This does have a lot to do with the Second Amendment, and I do think that there is some discussion that will come up out of this. But the fact of the matter is, rurally, this happens across the state, and there hasn't been an issue. Not a one. I ask for a no vote.
Mr. Calderon.
Now, generally, I would be Yih-Chau Richardson Bill. He was and is an icon for the NRA. He was the darling of the NRA back then. And it was a bill about allowing guns in the home. And I voted for it when my colleagues were voting against it, because I represented, and I still do, East Los Angeles. And many times when they call the police don't come. So I get it. And I understand that. But here's the deal. If you have a gun and you're just carrying the sidearm in open, there isn't anything a police officer can do to ask you to give him that gun. There has to be some kind of probable cause. So how do we know if that gun is loaded or not? So that's the first dilemma. The second situation is where if you have bullets and gun on the same clip. Now, the level of rhetoric that we have been using as we talk to each other, not only in this state, probably even more so at the federal level, is very, very vitriolic and has not been very, very civil. We have not been civil with each other. I think more so at the federal level than California. I think we're pretty civil with each other over here. But the deal is that there is always going to be that one nut. Not someone who believes in their Second Amendment rights, but that one crazy person that is going to, for reasons understandable to us, is going to make a scene and is going to kill someone. And by having that gun and the bullets there, it just makes it easier for that to happen. And in this case, and since we can't, even when the bullets aren't on the clip, since we don't know, I think what we need to do is we need to be able to control that a little bit. This is not a rural problem necessarily. I saw a lot of guns being carried in the open in Washington, D.C. on many of the demonstrations over Obamacare and a number of other, Obamacare, you guys got me saying that, governmental health care reform and a lot of other issues. I don't think this is not taking away the right. What this is doing is this is helping the state protect other people by developing some kind of regulatory scheme where we can know or have some idea whether a gun is loaded or where that nut is. I ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Nielsen.
Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, a loophole? Nay, not a loophole, a constitutional right. It's such a de minimis argument that this is a loophole. A loophole that's long established and settled in American society, long undergirded as, in fact, that constitutional right. And this constant attempt around here to remove that constitutional right. Those who believe in the Second Amendment truly have taken to having holsters, not with guns, but they roll up a piece of a copy of the United States Constitution as a reminder. They're trampling on the United States Constitution and that historic right of Californians and Americans. You are disarming our citizens while doing nothing whatsoever to prevent criminals from using weapons to continue their carnage in the streets. In fact, we're voting for things like AB 109 around here that are going to put over 100,000 inmates and parolees in our community. Be advised, ladies and gentlemen, they won't be obeying any open carry laws. That's where we should place our focus, on ensuring public safety in our streets and doing rehabilitative things we can do for criminals without letting them all out to gain havoc in our community. So repealing AB 109 would be a better dedication of our energies here. You keep in mind that it's not a common practice, Californians, to carry any weapon. More so in rural areas where there are many other imperatives, I think, that would require it. Particularly those of us who have worked out in the fields and have had to deal with rattlesnakes and such. There's a good self-protection cause to carry a weapon. But even in communities, and this bill contains a convoluted, vast array of exceptions that no law enforcement official will ever be trained sufficiently to respect and heed. So there will be apprehending individuals, not knowing whether or not they have violated this law that is so cumbersome, in such a cumbersome manner drafted. No, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a good use of our time here today to disarm and to characterize a historic constitutional right as a legal loophole.
Mr. Amiano.
Thank you, Madam Chair and colleagues, and with all due respect, the only reason a person would openly carry a firearm is to use it, or to make people believe that they would use it. This is an act of intimidation. Instead of resolving conflicts, intimidation is a way of engendering conflict. The very fact that a person is showing their weapon can escalate an otherwise minor problem into a violent and tragic one. It seems to me that the opposition to this bill assumes that quick access to a firearm prevents crime. In fact, a person who gets angry and has a firearm at the ready is far more likely to cause violence than if a firearm weren't readily accessible. In an age of violence and terrorism, the last things we need on the streets are more guns. I am proud to be a joint author of this measure and urge an aye vote.
Dr. Haldeman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Permission to ask the author a question?
Without objection.
Thank you. Sir, my question is about the wording of the exceptions, and there are more than 25 of them listed in this bill. One of the exceptions is that it would be permissible to do the following: the open carrying of an unloaded handgun within a school zone, or with the written permission of the school superintendent or his designee. I just wondered where that exception came from, and if it's dangerous in Starbucks, wouldn't it be dangerous on a school ground, which this bill exempts?
The current bill tries to be, or is consistent with the current school zone laws on the books. So the references to the school zone are consistent with the current school zone references. We did not want to get in conflict with other current laws as they pertain to the school zone. So that's why it's consistent with the school zone.
Ms. Skinner.
Members, I rise in support of AB 144. And I'm curious that the debate is centered around that this is going to impinge on our citizens and our constitutional right to bear arms and carry weapons. This does not in any way infringe on anyone carrying a concealed weapon that has a concealed weapon permit. What this does, and I am speaking to the notion that it is our right to put boundaries around even constitutional rights to ensure public health, safety, and welfare. There is a city in the East Bay that borders at least 3 of myself and 2 colleagues' districts, Walnut Creek, where at a Starbucks there, over, not in the recent months, but over a 2-year period, there were many proponents of open carry who would show up at this Starbucks and have their weapons fully revealed to the public. Now, this may seem like just a innocent act of, demonstration of someone's rights, but I had an unbelievable number of constituents who called me, who then would no longer support that business because they were fearful of their lives. They wouldn't bring their families. They were afraid when their children were there. And what they were afraid is that the very evidence of the weapon could provoke someone else to become violent and could invoke an act of criminality unintentionally, and thus put everyone who was around there then at risk, whether it was law enforcement or just regular folks at that store. And this addresses that problem. It does address a loophole in our law, and I urge your vote.
Mr. Hagman.